Okay, monitoring and audit. So what monitoring and audit is how we ensure that the mitigation is carried out correctly. These are just some examples of mitigation and monitoring in action. This is obviously two archaeologists doing an archaeological watching brief. We have some monitoring of vibration as well in the other photographs. So Julie touched on this. So we have a management plan. These are often called mitigation management plans. Again, there are lots of different terms for them, but I'll just refer to them as MMPs. So a mitigation management plan. So this is what has to be prepared, and it has to clearly state what is required in the mitigation. And it also has to be stated in a manner that contractors and operators understand what is required of them, because we have to remember that the people reading it and the people who are responsible for making sure that mitigation happens are not archaeologists or heritage specialists. The archaeologist and heritage specialist is brought in to do the monitoring, but the person responsible for making sure that it happens is the project proponent or the contractor. So the plan must be written so they can understand what they must do to carry out their responsibilities and duties. I've put together just an example for a construction stage, what we would put in a management plan and a development project where archaeological remains. We haven't identified an archaeological site, so we are not doing a rescue excavation. We have found an area where we think archaeological remains may be affected. So we are doing an archaeological watching brief. So these are the things that we would have to include in the management plan so that the contractor, the project proponent, understands what has to happen. So first of all, you have to state the purpose of the plan, explain the procedures. For this example, an archaeological monitoring during construction works. Secondly, you have to state the qualifications of the archaeologist who will undertake the mitigation and the certification they will require. This could be issued by the Heritage Authority. Again, if you are a project proponent or a developer and you need to have an archaeologist to come and do the monitoring, you will want to ensure that that person is qualified to do it. So again, you would have a CV would have to be provided. The Heritage Authority may require that that archaeologist has a certification. They certainly require that the archaeologist has certain background that makes it appropriate for them to carry out the mitigation. So also you have to list the names and the qualifications in this management plan as well. So now, also, we need to be really clear about what we call pre-start requirements. So this is before, so this is for the construction stage, but we don't want the contractor to start works without having any idea of what's happening with the archaeological watching brief, with the monitoring. So this often includes the archaeologist who will be doing the monitoring going in and giving an induction, giving a meeting and explaining to the construction team, as well as the project proponent sometimes, what is required and what they will be doing on site, and what the contractor and the project proponent have to ensure what is put in place so that the archaeologist can do their job. For example, in our management plans, we always put that the archaeologist has to be notified 3 days before work start. That seems like a very short period of time. We can put 2 weeks, we could put a month, it doesn't matter, but 3 days is something that that seems to work. But again, it is a very short period. So also in this management plan, we have to describe where and when the archaeological monitoring will take place on the construction site. So you have to include a plan, a map, a really clear plan that shows exactly where you are going to be doing your archaeological monitoring. So you also have to state what happens if archaeological remains are identified. So if the archaeologist isn't on site and remains are identified, for instance, an example would be that all of the works in that area have to stop. It might be if you found what you think is archaeological remain, that everything within 10 meters of that find has to be fenced off. And then it has to, works can continue in other parts of the site, but they can't continue in that area. And also in the management plan, if something is found, so if some archaeology is identified, you have to list who is to be notified. So the contractor, the project proponent knows who to tell if something like this happens. Now, it could be the Heritage Authority, other government departments, the archaeologist, but you have to list very clearly what their responsibilities are if archaeology is found on the site. So you also need to describe what the archaeologist will do. So this gives the contractor, the project proponent, an understanding of what you're going to be doing on site, so that they'll be able to accommodate you, basically. So what you would do if archaeological remains are found is they would have to be hand excavated. You would record them, you would take notes, you would take photographs, make drawings and plans. And also, it is very important that you state the contractor is responsible for providing sufficient time for the archaeologist to do their job. Next, so what is monitoring audit? So the contractor, the project proponent, has a very clear document that explains exactly what is required by them, what their responsibilities are. So monitoring an audit is a tool comprising systematic, documented, periodic, and objective evaluation of how mitigation measures are being implemented with regards to the safeguarding of the affected heritage resources. So this is achieved through evaluation of mitigation measures by an independent monitor. So the project proponent has hired an archaeologist to do the monitoring. So the independent monitor will come in to make sure that the archaeologist is doing their job properly, and also that the contractor project proponent is allowing the archaeologist to do their job properly. And they will determine if the measures that are being implemented are in compliance with the requirements stated in the mitigation management plan. They also must determine if the mitigation measures are in compliance with regulatory requirements and standards. So monitoring and audit can take place in both the construction and the operation stages of the project. So how do we ensure that the mitigation is being implemented correctly? It's called compliance monitoring, so that all of the implemented mitigation is complying with all of the requirements. So this is undertaken through regular observation, recording, and reporting of mitigation activities. So the compliance monitor, the independent monitor, will come out into the field and observe, record, and make reports to make sure that all of the mitigation requirements written into the contracts are being implemented correctly. So the mitigation management plan will include a schedule that will state the frequency of these monitoring visits. So it will say how often the compliance monitor has to come to site. For example, they might have to come to site once a week for the duration of the mitigation measures. And it will also state the format for reporting of the monitoring results and the frequency of submission of these reports. And these reports would go to the government bodies, the Heritage Authority, as well as the project proponent, to ensure that the mitigation is being implemented properly. So a few things about the compliance monitor. This person should be independent. So they should not be associated with the person undertaking the mitigation or responsible for the mitigation. So they have to have a degree of independence. The monitor should also be properly qualified to understand these mitigation activities. There's no point in having a compliance monitor come and observe the mitigation if they don't understand what the mitigation is. So the monitor must determine if the mitigation is in compliance with regulatory requirements and standards, and they must assess the effectiveness of the mitigation. So this means, when I say assess the effectiveness, the compliance monitor might say, yes, they are conducting the mitigation properly, they are in accordance, but is it effective? And that's just something to keep in mind, and I'll come back to that in a moment. But also the compliance monitor must identify any unexpected problems or identify any unacceptable impacts if they occur. Now, these unexpected problems and unacceptable impacts are not necessarily the fault or because something has been done improperly, but things can occur. So the monitor, how are they appointed? They can be appointed by the Heritage Authority. Oh, dear me, that's a typo. Or appointed by the project proponent and approved by the Heritage Authority. So the objective of the implementation of environmental monitoring and audit for the project are a few things here. I'll just run quickly. This is a quotation from Hong Kong. To provide early indication should any of the environmental control measures or practices fail to achieve acceptable standards. So this is saying, you know, early on, we can see if something, you know, isn't working properly and we can fix it. So again, determine compliance with the regulatory requirements and standards, to monitor the performance, and to allow for remedial action in case something unexpected occurs. So what does happen when something goes wrong? So the mitigation monitoring plan, they should also include, as Julie referred to earlier, the AAA, the Alert, Alarm, and Action Plan. So this plan will flag up procedures to employ when there is potential for damage to heritage. This is identified through the regular monitoring of the compliance monitor and also through any changes in the condition of the heritage sites. So what it means, at the alert level, it must be determined if the operation of the development is responsible for any negative changes and how this can be stopped. The authority, heritage authority, will be notified at this point. At the alarm level, the danger to heritage is imminent unless immediate action is taken. So this action can include temporary emergency procedures if required, and also long-term measures to ensure the danger is removed. This may require more frequent monitoring or more stringent guidelines on acceptable levels. So how alert, alarm, action works? A really quick example running through here. So I mentioned riverbank erosion before, so I'll just use this as a quick example. It's not from the real world. It's just something I've put together as an example to show. So step one, what needs to happen is identify the predicted effects of riverbank erosion, and step two, identify the affected heritage. For instance, we could say any archaeological site within 100 meters of the edge of the river needs to be monitored to see if any negative effects are going to happen. So we also need to identify the baseline conditions, the amount of erosion prior to the dam operation, because erosion is going to probably occur naturally. So we need to know if the erosion that is occurring is a natural occurrence or if it is a result of the development, in this case, a dam. So next, a monitoring plan is set up to measure rates of erosion in the vicinity of the archaeological sites, and also note the distance of archaeological sites from the riverbanks. So an alert level needs to be set. So if erosion rates have increased to a point where they will threaten the archaeological sites in the future, implement measures to protect the sites. For instance, the changes in the dam operation or riverbank stabilization. So these measures are not emergency. These are long-term ways of dealing with it, because at this point, there is no imminent danger to the archaeological sites. This is something that could happen in future. So the alarm level could be measured by a distance to the riverbank where the site is in immediate danger. For instance, if the erosion has gone to a level where it is 5 meters from an archaeological site, immediate action must be taken to protect the site. So enforcement and penalties for non-compliance. Basically, especially for the operation stage, but also for the construction stage, the mitigation measures need to be a legal requirement. In many countries, there are monetary penalties, so fines for non-compliance, but work or operation can also be stopped from non-compliance, and in extreme situations, the permit could be removed for the project and work would have to stop, possibly even permanently. So finally, what are the results of effective monitoring? What effective monitoring can do is to help to improve the standards of mitigation design for future HIAs by evaluating what works in which situations and what does not. So it's a tool that we can use to improve our HIA work. So have better ways of mitigating by observing what has happened in real world situations. And it can also provide feedback into the overall HIA process to provide examples of successful mitigation. And again, these can be used to convince authorities and clients on future projects faced with similar impacts and conflicts. And that's all I have. Thank you.